Hey, what's going on, guys? Jason Jenkins. Monthly chart. There's a lot of room for this cycle to come down. So the long-term trend is still bullish. So there's a couple things. So this monthly cycle has a lot of room to come down. And I did a bunch of work last week. If you guys want to check the videos, but if you caught it, if you're on the cycle edge letter, you're going to see it. The same things. Essentially, though, that this latest monthly 8.6 count doesn't turn and doesn't bottom until December. So in between now and then, because it's a longer term wave, where I'm going to hit on some weekly and daily stuff to kind of trade around and what to watch for. But the point being is that this monthly cycle can come all the way back in, and that would line up pretty well with the 8.6 count as far as the oscillator goes. So just eyeballing that comes into the end of the year. That would be, well, it'd be a hell of a call, but more importantly, it's going to be tricky to trade, and it's probably would flush a lot of weak hands out. So that's the monthly. Oh, one more thing. I've talked about this, but I'll reiterate. 3 count is typical for a normal kind of pullback after a very steep move. So that puts you into June. We're only two down candles. You could even argue that this was a neutral candle, so maybe that puts you into July. But I do think, just from experience, after such a momentous, energetic move, it takes longer to work off that energy. So when you have a drastic pullback, there was a decent amount of pain when we went through 47,000. If you have another leg down, which I'll talk about the levels in a second, that type of pain takes time to heal. Time heals. Price can consolidate either through a bounce, a reactionary bounce, or via time. And so we'll see what materializes. The point being is I'm watching a 2 to 3 count put you into June, July for the next turn. When we go to the weekly chart, you'll see here also the fractal nature of the daily chart has pi line exactly where we held at 30,000. Actually, let me go to the futures. Let's do the daily. I'll come back to the weekly because the daily will set up the weekly. So the daily chart over here in futures, I've been talking about the 8.6 cycle. This doesn't include the weekend data, obviously, because the futures market's closed, but still watching 30,000. This is major, major, major. If you break that, a lot of technicians, and you break this low, they won't have the pi line in this cyclical level at 24,000, 25,000. This is something that we developed. I discovered it's an amazing edge. Pi holds all the time. It's more of a cyclical phenomenon. It's not just something that's going to show up on the chart necessarily. So this is what we're watching. The cycle can come in next week more. We've got to watch 30,000 as major. You break that, then all eyes on the pi line if you guys are following us in our model, 24,000, 25,000. Now from there, back to the weekly, you break that. This ebb and flow, the pivots that I care about here on the weekly chart that define the uptrend, this is kind of where we broke out from, 12,000. I've talked about that. That was on the turning point and on the monthly cycle. But this was a pivot low and pretty decent triangulation, very technical. But notice that the higher low is away from the bands. So that doesn't define the uptrend and the longer term trend on this particular time frame on the weekly. Just as this is a higher low, this is a higher low, this is a higher low, this is a higher low. All very momentous higher lows that mattered for the intermediate term trend. And that's why I talked about if you broke 47,000, then you can get the move back to pi on the daily. Then you can test the bands. But as far as the uptrend and the long-term bull market, this is clearly the pivot now. You break that leaves the door open for all types of, there's just a lot of hot air below the market. Again, if it's 24, 25 doesn't hold, then you're going to get the retest of the 12,000 level. You're going to get this retest of this breakout level. That's the 200, maybe even you go to 8. All right, that's just the technical setup. That's the odds. That's the probability. We know that from studying this stuff and back testing and just trading markets for 15 years, is that when you break certain levels, these are the next goalposts or areas to watch. So I'm not making that call. And again, the point isn't to make a $12,000 BTC call. The point is that if you break this low, you break that low, that's where your risk is. And again, let's not get too hung up on 24, 25,000 either until you take out 30. That's the point. And then on the upside, I'll go to the intermediate term charts, but I said that 40,000 was the intermediate term pivot. That's exactly where we struggled last week. All right, the daily chart, I've kind of been over this. Daily chart, here was the break, right? 47. I said if you break that, the odds are much higher that you get moved to the 200 and or the deeper pullback to a full pi cycle. It's exactly where the market held. And so now we're trapped between the longer term level, pivot here at 30, and this series of lower highs on the intermediate term. That's the underside of the 242, very technical. When you go to the hourly charts, hourly and 4 hour, you can see the bands did a great job, right? So how you play it matters, whether you're shorting, if your broker allows you to do that, or you're just hedging your longer term positions via futures. Don't forget that now you can trade the micro futures, that's MBT. So we do a lot of work around that. And these are all, these bounces to lower highs were opportunities to make sales. You can see it in futures pretty good. As far as the cycles, I highlighted in some of the analysis. And essentially, all these highs, all right, these are short selling opportunities or places to hedge. Boom, make some money, book some gains, book some gains. Okay, so just trying to trade multiple durations. You can have a long-term opinion, but why not make money in the near term and the short side and in the intermediate term? Okay, just to hit on some alts. I touched a little bit on Matic and Polkadot on Fig Friday. So a lot of the DeFi, a lot of these newer coins are just traded really well. I mean, they outperformed some of the older coins, I guess, the older, what I call major coins like Ripple and Litecoin, but held the bands just because you went below it. This is an area, it's like a chain link fence, you can press up against it. We don't want to just get bearish when the bands are rising and you get below it. This is an area, so still making higher lows. That's just still very bullish. Very similar for Polkadot. Similar to the overall market. We broke the pivot here in April. Okay. And you're just going to have a lot to deal with before you turn the momentum back up. You got to start making higher highs. But we're buying the teens. I talked about if you get same type of thing, you get that bounce to 40,000 on Bitcoin, then you're going to see the underside of some of these alts struggle. So it's still a $15 to $25 range there. Ripple, I didn't highlight last week. It outperformed in March and April, and now it's lagging. So what tends to happen with Ripple is when it gets quiet and it underperforms, it just seems like something happens and they pump it back up. So if you settle into this 50, 60 cent range, if you like trading Ripple, we haven't really been a fan of the underlying idea for a long time since we traded them. That doesn't mean you can't. Just because you don't like it as much as a different blockchain doesn't mean it's not worthy to trade. So if you get back to 50, 60 cents, I'm a buyer. The resistance is up at 110. You can see it's just a lot of similar price action. Binance, I covered that in pretty much good detail Friday. Same thing, be a buyer, whether it's down here in front of the 200 like the last time I pulled the trigger, or even if you got the 160. It is one of the best altcoins out there since really this year. So it's also had a nasty some of those Chinese headlines that really came down hard. So there'll be a lot of back and forth. Just know that the edges are what they are. And then up at here at 380 wasn't the place to chase. You know, the better spot was to be buying 240 and then lighten up on some. So you still have all these charts are the same. You got to get the bands back bullish before any type of real momentum. You're going to have a lot of back and forth. So just trade it. The daily cycle could come in more. Ethereum, I laid this out on some analysis. But you can see here this year, Ethereum's been the strongest, the network effect we love. So continually be a buyer. The features are out now, so we've been trading that around too. I'll try to do some more work this week on Bitcoin Cash, because sometimes when that sticks out, what I mean by that is like if it widens out where it's kind of overbought relative to what Bitcoin's doing, I like shorting Bitcoin Cash and then being versus your long Bitcoin, kind of a nice pairs trade. Anyway, guys, this should be an exciting week coming into month end in May. I'll have some updates from my team, my group, and Cycle Edge, as far as the traditional markets. Have a great rest of your long weekend, and talk to you some in the morning.